All right, ready to dive deep into something you see all the time, but maybe don't fully understand?
Hmm. Sounds intriguing.
How does a sail actually work?
Okay.
You
Yeah.
might be prepping for a sailing trip or just love physics, but get ready for some surprises.
Surprises, huh?
We're going to unpack a common explanation and then reveal a surprisingly simple alternative.
An alternative explanation.
Yeah, one you might not find in textbooks or even MIT lectures.
Interesting.
Our source material is physicist Miles Mathis and his paper, How Does a Sail Work? Not Like You Are Told.
Okay.
Now, Mathis claims his physics papers actually outrank NASA and Scientific American on some search engines.
Really?
So we're dealing with a pretty unconventional perspective.
That's right. And Mathis's work challenges a lot of accepted theories.
But what's fascinating is his explanation of how sails work is almost too simple to believe. But it might just change how you see this everyday phenomenon.
I'm all ears.
The best part is you can test out his theory at home with everyday objects.
Oh,
But first, let's cover what most of us are taught about how sails work.
okay.
The common explanation is that a sail acts like an airplane wing, right?
Right.
We hear terms like lift, airfoils, and the Coanda effect.
Yes, the Coanda effect is often used to explain how the curved shape of a sail creates lift. It states that a fluid like air will tend to follow a curved surface.
Okay.
So as the wind flows over the curved sail, it creates a low-pressure area on one side and a high-pressure area on the other, generating lift.
Like when you blow over a piece of paper and it rises.
Exactly.
I even remember a demonstration from the Curiosity show back in the 70s where they blew on the back of a curved sail to demonstrate this effect.
Right, but there are some issues with relying solely on the Coanda effect to explain how sails work, especially when we consider how boats can sail against the wind.
And the keel is often compared to an upside-down airplane wing, providing lift in the water.
Yeah.
But does that really hold up?
Well, that's where the traditional explanations start to break down. As Mathis points out, some of these theories about airfoils have actually been disproven, and the shape of a keel doesn't really act like an upside-down wing.
Plus, those explanations never fully connect how the sideways force on the sail actually translates into forward motion for the boat.
Yeah, you're right.
Even MIT's explanation with all its diagrams and equations seems to miss that crucial step.
Exactly, and that's why Mathis's approach is so interesting.
So where does Mathis take us instead?
His explanation hinges on a concept he calls pinch.
Pitch.
Imagine you're holding a sail at an angle to the wind, kind of like a hand catching a ball from the side.
So like when a sailboat is tacking.
Exactly. Now picture a wedge-shaped block being pushed against a wall.
Okay.
The force you apply gets translated into forward motion simply because of that wedge shape.
Okay, I can visualize that.
Yeah.
So how does this wedge analogy apply to a sailboat?
The centerboard of the boat acts like the wall, and the sail, angled against the wind, becomes the other side of the wedge.
So the wind is pushing on the sail, creating that pinch against the centerboard and propelling the boat forward.
Precisely. It's remarkably simple and elegant. No need for complex equations or obscure aerodynamic principles.
So you're saying a simple wedge explains how sailboats can move against the wind. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's like those door stops that keep a door from slamming shut.
Yeah,
The wedge shape transforms a sideways force into forward motion.
exactly. And if you observe a sailboat tacking into the wind, the forces at play really highlight this pinch idea. Without a centerboard or a rudder, a sailboat in a close haul wouldn't just drift sideways, it would actually slide backward and even start to spin.
I can see that. If the wind is hitting the sail at an angle, it's almost like it's pushing the back of the boat more than the front.
That's the pinch in action. The wind pressure is greater on the rear part of the sail because of the angle. And without the centerboard to act as that wall, the boat can't convert that pressure into forward movement.
Ah, so the centerboard provides that resistance that the sail needs to push against, completing that wedge shape.
Precisely. And this concept helps to explain why sailboats often reach their highest speeds when the wind is coming directly from the side known as a beam reach. That's when you have the widest wedge angle, allowing for the most efficient transfer of force from the wind to the boat.
It's amazing how something so straightforward can explain a phenomenon that often gets shrouded in complicated physics. I've always wondered how those tiny sailboats can zip across the water so quickly.
Right, and this ties into Mathis' argument that mainstream science often overcomplicates things, adding layers of unnecessary complexity that obscure the core principles.
But wouldn't there be pushback from the scientific community on his claims? This idea of the pinch and the wedge analogy seems pretty different from what's traditionally taught about sails.
Oh, absolutely. Mathis acknowledges that he's actually quite critical of what he sees as a resistance to new ideas within mainstream science.
You mentioned earlier that he even believes there's active censorship of alternative theories.
Yes. He claims in his paper that his work has been suppressed, particularly by Google. He points out that while his physics papers rank higher than prestigious institutions on some search engines, they're practically invisible on Google.
That's definitely interesting to consider. Why would there be such resistance to his ideas? I mean, we're not talking about something that would upend the entire scientific world, are we?
Well, if Mathis is right, it does raise questions about some fundamental physics concepts. And challenging long-held beliefs can be uncomfortable for those who have built their careers on them. It's like suggesting that a much simpler tool could do the job of a complicated machine. People might feel a bit threatened by that.
So what does this all mean for someone who isn't a physicist, but is just curious about how things work? What should we take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that it's always valuable to question assumptions and seek out different perspectives. Even when something seems well established, there might be alternative explanations that are simpler and more elegant.
And in the case of the sail, Mathis actually encourages us to try out his theory for ourselves. He says you can demonstrate this whole pinch and wedge principle at home using just a block of wood and a wall.
Exactly. Science isn't limited to labs and universities. It's something we can explore and experience in our daily lives.
I love that. So by applying a little pressure and watching what happens, we can get a better grasp of the forces at play. We don't even need a physics degree for that.
That's the beauty of it. That hands-on approach, that willingness to experiment and see for yourself is what leads to real breakthroughs in understanding.
You know, it's like that old saying, the simplest explanation is usually the best. Meta theory really embodies that idea.
It certainly does. And it reminds us that there's always more to learn and discover, even in the seemingly mundane things we encounter every day.
Speaking of learning and discovering, before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the potential implications of Mathis's work. He asks a pretty bold question. If scientists can't accurately explain something as commonplace as a sail, what does that say about their theories on more complex topics?
That's a thought-provoking question, isn't it? It challenges us to consider that some of the accepted explanations we've been taught might not be as solid as we think.
It's almost like he's hinting at a whole other way of understanding the universe, one that maybe isn't as complicated as we've been led to believe.
It's certainly an intriguing possibility, and one that invites us to approach our understanding of the world with a healthy dose of curiosity and skepticism.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder if we're sometimes making things more complicated than they need to be.
It's very possible.
Maybe there's a simpler, more elegant explanation for all sorts of phenomena just waiting to be discovered.
And it highlights the fact that science is a constantly evolving process. What we accept as truth today could be revised or even overturned tomorrow as new evidence comes to light.
So it's a good reminder to stay open-minded, right?
Oh, absolutely.
To acknowledge that we don't have all the answers and that there's always more to learn.
And to be willing to entertain ideas that challenge our current understanding, even if they seem unconventional.
What I find really compelling about Mathis's work is that how he brings back a sense of wonder and accessibility to science.
Mm.
He takes something as familiar as a sail and shows us that there's still so much we can learn and explore, even in the everyday things we take for granted.
It's like he's reminding us that science isn't just for academics in ivory towers. It's for everyone.
Yeah.
We can all engage with these concepts and test them out for ourselves.
And by stripping away the complicated jargon and equations, he makes it possible for anyone, regardless of their scientific background, to grasp these fundamental principles. You don't need a PhD to understand how a sail works.
Exactly. So the next time you see a sailboat gliding across the water, take a moment to appreciate the forces at play. Think about that pinch and the simple wedge principle that propels it forward.
And maybe even try Mathis's wedge experiment at home.
I like it.
Grab a block of wood, find a wall, and see for yourself how that simple setup can create forward motion. It's a great way to experience these principles firsthand.
It is. And who knows, maybe that hands-on exploration will spark a new curiosity in you, a desire to question and investigate the world around you with fresh eyes.
So what do you think, listeners? Does Mathis's explanation of the sail resonate with you?
Yeah.
Have you tried his wedge experiment at home? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Remember, the beauty of science lies in its constant evolution and the potential for new discoveries. Keep asking questions, exploring different perspectives, and never lose that sense of wonder.
And with that thought-provoking image, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the surprising world of how a sail works. We hope you've enjoyed the journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those sails full.